Welcome to Geology 3330, Geomorphology. Today we're going to continue our discussion of the fluvial system with Module 3, which is our third and final module on the fluvial system. Last time, you recall, we talked about the concept of the different types of river systems that we had. We talked about braided streams. We talked about meandering streams. We also talked about flow within the channels. Today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk first about flooding, and then we're going to end up focusing on deltas. We're going to look at the older model of delta development by G.K. Gilbert, which has top set, foreset, and bottom set beds. We are also going to look at the modern way of classifying deltas by the process that's operating on them. Those processes are river processes, wave processes, and tidal processes. With that, I would like to shift to the PowerPoint presentation. Since one of our major topics for today's discussion is floods, I wanted to start out by this photo taken up in central Wyoming of a major flash flood event during August where the water came down and there was so much rain that it came down and went through this stream, this community that was along the edge of a stream, totally flooding it, depositing huge amounts of mud and even destroying some of the houses that are there. It is very common to have this kind of flooding. If we look at what a flood is a short-lived amount of water that comes down through the stream, down through the river channel, and occupies the total extent of what the stream is. Their floods can be divided into flash floods, which are very short-lived events, prolonged floods, which are usually associated with spring runoff and melt of extensive snowpacks from winter. Flood erosion is very intense because of the great amount of sediment. The higher water moves faster and picks up a larger amount of sediment. Flood deposition deposits that sediment on the floodplain and causes the floodplain to build upward. It also causes the levees to build upward, and it oftentimes leads to meander bypass and producing oxbow lakes that we talked about last time. When we talk about the frequency of floods, floods are usually divided into the annual flood, the 10-year flood, the 25-year flood, 50-year flood, 100-year flood. These floods usually occur as the result of some major precipitation event, particularly here in Texas. If you look at the image on the two images on the upper right, this is Pedernales Falls on an average day. I was out there where you can see those people near the falls, looking at some crinoids and other things. And I saw the water start to rise, and immediately I got out and came up to the observation point from which this photo was taken. The river raised so quickly that it came all the way up to the base of the trail that I had been out, and I would have worried of being caught out there. This took place within about 5 to 7 minutes. I mean, I just had time to get up to the observation booth when the water went up to this point. It was really quite a scary situation. And they warn all the people that go down there, and every year they have a number of people drowned by water coming over Pedernales Falls. This ranks as basically a flash flood that's a very quick type of flash flood. When we talk about the occurrence of floods over and over again, the annual year flood is the one that we have once a year, the high point the river reaches once a year. And if you live down on Regay Street and some of those apartments, like the Bonita Creek apartments or University Club apartments, you'll find that they are flooded on the buildings that are down next to Bonita Creek are flooded almost every year. And if you move into those lower apartments, you're going to lose your computer and everything else when your apartment floods. Here in Nacogdoches, I'm often asked what is a 100-year flood, and I refer back to 1983. In 1983, we had a major downpouring for about 4 days. Bonita, Lanana Creek over on the east side of campus kept going up and up and up, and Johnson Coliseum was a brand new building at that point in time. and the waters went down into Johnson Coliseum. And there is a picture on the front page of the Daily Sentinel showing that the backboards on the Johnson Coliseum playing floor about 3 inches above water. So it totally filled all of Johnson Coliseum. At the same time, the area down where we now have the dog park was a sequence of low-income housing. Those houses were totally flushed out and people lost everything. So that is the situation with the 100-year flood here in Nacogdoches. When you look at flooding, you can see the diagram on the lower left where the stream is up over its banks and totally drowning those buildings that are there. It's unfortunate these people built on a point bar. You can see the point bar, and they didn't pay any attention to where the chute channels are on that point bar. And literally the stream came around the point bar, went up over the point bar like it always does, and flooded them. I get the question, what are catastrophic floods? Well, one of the things that I think most about is Lake Missoula. About 10,000 years ago, the Cordilleran ice sheet blocked the Columbia River, produced a gigantic lake that extended from the Idaho Panhandle all the way past Missoula. When that ice melted, it released a wall of water that came down through eastern Oregon, covering eastern Oregon with between 40 and 100 feet of water, and drowned everybody that was out on that flat area. I'm sure if you were the Paleo Indians that were living there when that ice dam broke and you were caught in your lava tube and drowned, you would have swore that the gods were mad at you as that water poured into your lava tube and drowned you. Oftentimes when I think of Noah's flood, I always also think about the Missoula flood, because the Missoula flood went down to the eastern end of the Columbia River Gorge, and the gorge is so narrow it couldn't handle that kind of water, and so it backed up the river, making the flooding even worse in the southern part of Washington. And I think, if the estimates are correct by geologists, it took about 3 months for the water level to drop back down. A lot of times when I'm in church and I read the story of Noah and the flood, I wonder if he wasn't just caught in one of those areas where you had a Missoula flood type of situation and covered the whole land with water. The same thing happened in the Snake River drainage. Lake Bonneville, which covered about 1/3 of the state of Utah, had a great big lake there called Lake Bonneville. When it reached its high point at Red Rock Pass, it broke an earth-filled dam and dropped the level of the lake from about 5,200 feet down to 4,800 feet in a matter of about 3 months, which produced a gigantic flood down along the Snake River. It is interesting to me, when my wife was at Rexburg going to school at Ricks College, the Corps of Engineers were building the Teton Dam. When the Teton Dam in 1976 was completed, they took the water all the way up to the very top. And when they got all the way to the very top of the dam, or up next to the top of the dam, the left side of the dam kicked out. And my wife remembers sitting in her dorm room at Ricks College watching the flood go down through the middle of Rexburg, Idaho. So we even have some examples. There are other examples of dams breaking here in the U.S. and flooding communities. The next thing we need to do is talk about the depositional portion of the system. Deltas are the outcome of where the river meets either A, a lake, or B, the ocean. If the river goes into a deep body of water, it will produce what is called the classic G.K. Gilbert delta, where you have top set, foreset, and bottom set beds. As the stream slows down, when it hits its ultimate base level, it drops all of its sediment, and it'll drop some horizontally, and then it'll drop, as it's building outward, it drops those along the slope. And then when the deposition slacks off, it produces horizontal beds. The second way which we have of looking at deltas is by what the dominant process the build deltas are. This is the way we typically look. This is the more modern way of looking at deltas. That we have river-dominated deltas, wave-dominated deltas, and tidal-dominated. River-dominated are like the Mississippi River, which are usually birdfoot. Wave-dominated deltas are like the Brazos River and Sabine River deltas. And the tidal-dominated deltas are like those of the San Jacinto and Trinity rivers, where they go into a bay and have long tidal channels. So the three processes are river input, wave tearing the delta down, and tides moving sediment as they go in and out. If we look at these examples of these three, look at the Bird's Foot Delta up at the top, which is the classic Mississippi Delta. You look at the lower right, that is the Brazos River Delta, and you can see the water going out into it. And on the lower left, you have a tidal-dominated delta from India. I always have to put the Nile Delta in. This is a satellite image from Google of the Nile River Delta, and you can see that it is very much a wave-dominated delta. Well, in conclusion, we have talked about in this unit, we've talked about flooding. We've talked about the various levels of flood of the annual, 10-year, 25-year, 50-year, and 100-year floods. We've talked about what exactly constitutes a flood. We have also talked about the types of deltas. We first looked at the G.K. Gilbert model for water going into rivers emptying into a deep basin, such as lakes, or such as along the west tectonically active margin, like the west coast of the U.S. We've also talked about the way deltas are classified presently into river-dominated, tidal-dominated, and wave-dominated deltas. It is now time for you to go to D2L and download the questions, answer them, and then upload them. Also, there will be a discussion question at the end where you need to discuss the three different processes that are used to classify modern deltas. With that, I will see you next time.